There have been many, many failures with online music. I remember N2K, we all remember Jerry Kirby's Liquid Audio, and many others since. All have crashed and burned. I'm wondering whether Spotify will follow in that noble but doomed tradition. There have, however, also, alongside all those failures, been a handful of successes. And one of the most notable is the Berkeley-based digital music startup Gracenote. Ty Roberts is the co-founder and the current chief technology officer of Gracenote, and I invited him to talk about why it is that Gracenote has survived and prospered while so many other online music companies have failed. And just before you start, Ty, perhaps for the members of the audience who don't know the history of Gracenote, tell us when it was founded, how it's grown, and where we're at now.
Okay. Well, the Gracenote started in 1998, and basically we came out of the CD-ROM era. Basically, my background was producing what I hope to be interactive record albums with major music artists like David Bowie, and I got to work with Brian Eno. And the idea was to try to advance the format of what a rich multimedia record album will be. And this is in the mid-90s, 95, and so. So the problem is that the CD-ROM business was ultimately not successful. It basically was supplanted by the internet. And what happened is the internet was at that time very small. It's hard to remember 28.8 modem and what the internet was really like.
Even back in
96, 97, you were down up on like a slow modem. You didn't have a hard connection. And so the reality of that was that the only thing you could really get through the internet was information, text, very basic information. I couldn't send a rich, interactive, multimedia visual recording through the internet. I could off a CD-ROM, but I couldn't do it through the internet. So I decided that I would focus on information about recordings. Okay, so basically where they recorded, what the names of the artist was, what the names of the songs were, what kind of music was it, why do you care about this, where's it from, who's listening to it, that kind of information. And so I met up with another gentleman, Steve Sheriff, and he basically had created the CD database, but he didn't exactly know what to do with it. He had the information, but at that time it was just putting up the names of songs on the computer when you put a CD into a computer.
Was that CDDB?
CDDB. And so what I said was, well, we want to have that information about what the songs are, but that's only then to enable the use of the music, the playing of it, the playlisting of it, the talking about it, the sharing it. And what I didn't understand was the ripping of it. Basically, very quickly after we started working in the company, the concept of an MP3 file was invented. And then the idea that you could take the music you had in your CD collection and make MP3 files out of it, that was invented by like Real Networks and a company called Music Match. And so these guys had these programs where you put the CD in the computer, and with one button you could copy it to your hard drive, legally, and you'd have your files, and you could take your CD and put it back in your desk drawer. And without our naming service to name the files, those files would be named File 101, File 102, File 103, totally useless. So our database became the link between taking the CD and converting it to MP3 files.
So you're the guys, when I put a disc into my computer when I want to upload it onto iTunes, you're the guys who translate those ones and zeros into real information.
That's correct. And I think the main thing to be said about that is that there are many people with many CDs and their walls of CDs in their homes, and they wanted to convert those. They didn't want to go and rebuy all that music again. They had very high quality copies, and in fact, this became a very popular thing to do. We were lucky that at the very beginning of the digital revolution, that one of our developers that was using the APIs that CDDB had was the guy who created iTunes. Essentially, he licensed our API as a small developer, sold his company to Apple, and then that API was inside the software when Apple started developing iTunes.
Who was that?
His name is Jeff Robbins, and I think he's the head of consumer products for Apple now, today. And his application was, I think, called SoundJam MP, which was just a music player, MP music player application for the Macintosh.
Are you suggesting then, Ty, that your product was used inadvertently for piracy?
Not at all, because people had to have CDs. I mean, I'm sure people bought pirate CDs at flea markets or whatever, but if that was the way you were going to get music, it was much easier to go online to something like, you know, the original Napster, or to go onto a server and steal a bunch of music online. So actually, the recording industry realized if you actually had CDs, you were actually okay, because you'd actually bought something at least once, and you were much more likely to be a person who was actually going to buy things in the future than somebody who never had any CDs and just went to a server and downloaded a ton of files. And our software didn't really work on that use case anyways. So I do think that we helped convert CD consumers to digital, which then made them digital consumers more rapidly. And maybe we did that for a lot of people who had invested a lot in the CD marketplace, and they didn't feel ripped off, and they weren't angry about the purchases they made in the past. Had we not been there, and those people had to somehow rebuy the stuff again, they probably would have chosen to do something else with their money, and they probably would have lost a lot of people who would have been interested in music on the digital side.
And how did you make your money?
We licensed the service to companies like Apple, but we also got involved early in automobiles that did the same thing, and we got involved in mobile handsets and mobile phones. And so basically our business was a business-to-business business where we licensed our information service, as it were, to these companies. And so, I mean, quite honestly said, there is money in music, but the money in music is for the people who own the copyrights to the music. So record companies, I think, while maybe not done as well as they did years ago, generally get paid when people use their music. Gracenote got paid when people used the information about the music, and that turned out to be a really good business, and not just a business in one country, a business globally. So we could actually provide that information all over the world.
And you've essentially become the dominant player in this space. Do you have any competitors?
There are competitors in different niches that we have. So Rovi has data in music and movies, but they don't really have all the services that we have. There's nobody really in automotive that's doing all the things we're doing there. Mobile handsets, really what we're doing there is playlisting and things like that, and synchronization. So I'd say in every niche there are competitors, but very few have all the services like we have.
And you've spread across the entire entertainment industry.
We have the company now is you know, many hundred people. We're in every country.
How many hundred?
I think 350 is the current number, and we're basically in the U.S. and have a big operation in Europe, a big operation in Asia, and Japan, and Taiwan, and Korea. We are providing information for music on a global basis in 60 languages, and we have about 100 million tracks in our database, and so that's just the music side. I mean, the reality is, maybe 3 years ago, we expanded quite rapidly into video and television, so now we do similar things, but information for television and for movies.
How is the disappearance of the optical disc impacting on your business?
Well, people moved from, I guess, the identification of CDs and putting them into the computer. Most people have done that if they had those, to now needing to know more about the individual tracks, the individual songs themselves. So we actually created a technology called audio fingerprinting. Audio fingerprinting looks at the sound inside of the song file, identifies it, and then we invented another technology which actually listens to the music and comes up with attributes like the mood and tries to understand what's going on to the music sonically. And so this information is what we sell now, and that information is a majority of our products are people wanting to get access to information about the song to do general playlisting or to do recommendation products. So for example, Apple uses some of this data to power the Genius service.
How could Gracenote help solve the problem of piracy?
Well, I always felt that the way to solve privacy was to have a relationship with your consumer. That what we had worked on for a couple of years, and this is in the last few years, we were working on trying to come up with a connected, expandable, I'll call it music container, so that the songs would be only part of the product, the music product. The music product would actually have photographs, it would have videos, it would have information, it would have the lyrics, it would have the songs. And this was a container that could live on, and as people socially played the recording, additional information would be added to it, and essentially it would be a living, breathing kind of future album, you know, which is kind of back to what I try to do more than 15.
And this is your product, or this is?
It's something we worked on in partnership with, very heavily with Warner Music. We worked on it with Sony Music. And the problem is that the I'll call it dominant music playing companies, even Apple itself, really were not that interested, I think, in they wanted to keep the file-based sales system kind of going because they had already made it very successful. And so we just weren't able to get enough mojo behind advancing this. And the reason record companies would want to do this was the best way to motivate people to buy something is by providing additional value and to have a continuous relationship with them. Beating them over the head with a stick doesn't work that well. And so the problem is if you have a product that essentially is dead the day you ship it, in other words, it's just a file of music and there's no relationship with the consumer, it's really tough to provide that additional value. The difference between a stolen product and a purchased product is not much.
Are you a big data company?
Are we a big data company? Well, we don't have a lot of data on individuals. We have data on aggregate usage, so it's not Facebook-like data. But the reality is we do see patterns of information about what people are using, and when we use that information to guide our editorial efforts and to figure out how to make the music experience better. So I guess I'd say I have a lot of data, but I don't have the data that ties it to individuals like Facebook or anything like that.
Are you concerned as a, excuse the term, don't take this personally, a veteran in the data business? Are you concerned with the rather cavalier way in which some of these new Silicon Valley startups are cavalierly using other people's, their users' personal data?
I guess I'd say that they need to be careful. I mean, I was lucky enough to, in one of the very first privacy issues that were out there, which neural networks had an issue with privacy. So I learned in the early 2000s you had to be very careful about people's data. And so that was a learning experience. I think these guys need to be careful because at some point somebody's going to do something that isn't very friendly with that data. Maybe them, maybe not even them, somebody else. And so the reality is that I do think that one has to be very careful and really respect, especially large amounts of aggregate data. Somebody's going to break in your system and take it all. Maybe you don't even realize that somebody already even has taken it. So I do really think that they need to be careful.
Well, there you have it. If you're in a data startup, take that advice from a data veteran, a guy who's built a successful global business on data and respected individual privacy. Ty Roberts, the co-founder and CTO of Gracenote. Thank you so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV.
Thank you. Bye-bye.